"That's her," my neighbor shouted as the police grabbed my wrists. "She lied to officers." I was standing barefoot in the middle of our apartment courtyard, groceries spilled across the pavement, while half the building watched from their balconies recording me on their phones. Officer Ramirez tightened the handcuffs and said, "You should have thought twice before filing a false emergency report." I tried to explain that I wasn't lying, that just hours earlier I'd seen my neighbor Derek walk out of 82-year-old Mrs. Harper's apartment carrying a metal lockbox while she cried inside. Derek immediately cut in. "See, she's making things up again." The officers believed him. But right before they pushed me into the squad car, I pulled out my phone and said, "Then you need to watch the video my security camera recorded this morning." One officer opened the file. 3 seconds later, his entire expression changed. His eyes narrowed at the screen. Then he replayed the first few seconds. Beside him, Officer Ramirez frowned. "What is it?" The other officer didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at my phone like he suddenly wasn't sure who he'd handcuffed anymore. Across the courtyard, Derek's confidence slipped for the first time all night. "Is there a problem?" he asked, trying to sound calm. The officer finally looked up. "How long do you have saved on this camera?" I swallowed hard. Everything from this morning automatically uploads. The entire courtyard went quiet. A minute earlier, neighbors had been whispering about me loud enough for me to hear every word. She always acts dramatic. I knew she was trouble. Now nobody said anything. Derek stepped closer to the officers. "Look, she's trying to distract you. Mrs. Harper already told you nothing happened." "That's enough," Officer Ramirez snapped without even looking at him. That caught my attention immediately. 5 minutes earlier, Ramirez wouldn't even let me finish a sentence. Now his tone toward Derek had completely changed. The officer holding my phone zoomed in on the footage. I couldn't fully see the screen from the back of the squad car, but I recognized the hallway outside our apartments instantly. My floor, my door camera angle, Mrs. Harper's doorway across from mine. And Derek standing there. My stomach tightened. I remembered exactly why I'd checked the footage in the first place. That morning, around 7, I'd heard shouting through the hallway while getting ready for work. At first I ignored it because Derek was constantly arguing with somebody in the building. Delivery drivers, tenants, maintenance workers. But then I heard Mrs. Harper crying. Not yelling. Crying. When I opened my door, Derek was coming out of her apartment carrying a small metal lockbox against his chest. The second he saw me, his entire face changed. Then Mrs. Harper appeared behind him, looking terrified. And somehow, by the end of the day, I was the one in handcuffs. The officer suddenly lowered the phone. "Call the sergeant back," he said quietly. Officer Ramirez blinked. "Why?" The officer looked directly at Derek. "Because I think we arrested the wrong person." Derek laughed nervously the second he heard that. "Come on," he said, forcing a smile toward the officers. "You're seriously taking her side now. She's been obsessed with me for months." I sat frozen in the back of the squad car, my wrists still cuffed, while Officer Ramirez stepped away with my phone. For the first time since they arrived, nobody was paying attention to me anymore. All eyes were on Derek. That should have felt satisfying. Instead, my heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Because I still didn't know exactly what the camera had captured. Earlier that morning, I'd only checked the footage long enough to confirm what I thought I saw, Derek leaving Mrs. Harper's apartment with a lockbox. I sent the welfare report before work because something about her expression bothered me all day. But now, the officers were replaying the video over and over. And Derek was getting visibly uncomfortable. "You already talked to Mrs. Harper," he said sharply. "She said Grace made the whole thing up." Officer Ramirez didn't respond. That silence seemed to rattle Derek more than an argument would have. A few neighbors started drifting closer to hear better. Phones were still recording from balconies above us. The same people who watched me get arrested were now whispering Derek's name instead of mine. I noticed Mrs. Chen from Building 3 staring at him with narrowed eyes. Then she quietly muttered, "I told you his story didn't make sense." Derek heard her. His face tightened instantly. He pointed toward me. "She's the problem here. She's been trying to get me in trouble ever since the HOA meeting." That part was true. 2 months earlier, I'd publicly questioned why Derek had installed cameras facing directly into shared walkways and apartment entrances. He claimed it was for building safety. But afterward, several tenants admitted privately that he used the footage to monitor people constantly. And ever since that meeting, Derek treated me like a target. Officer Ramirez suddenly opened the squad car door. His voice was calmer now. "Grace," he said, "why didn't you mention your camera recorded audio too?" My stomach dropped. Because I honestly forgot it did. Then Ramirez asked the question that made Derek go pale. "Do you still have the full unedited file?" Derek answered before I could. "She edits videos," he said quickly. "Anybody can cut clips together now." Officer Ramirez ignored him completely. I nodded slowly. The original files upload automatically to cloud storage. Nothing been changed. The second I said that, Derek's composure cracked. Not dramatically. Just enough. A twitch in his jaw, his arms folding tighter across his chest, his eyes darting toward the building entrance like he was calculating something. The sergeant arrived moments later, stepping out of an unmarked SUV while Ramirez briefed him quietly beside the squad car. I couldn't hear everything they said, but I caught 3 words clearly. Inside the apartment. The sergeant immediately held out his hand for my phone. Derek took a step forward. "This is ridiculous. You're acting like I committed a crime because I helped an old woman organize paperwork." The sergeant finally looked at him. "Then this should clear you pretty easily." That shut him up. The courtyard had turned completely different now. Earlier, people were filming me like I was some crazy neighbor getting exposed. Now everyone looked uncomfortable. Like they were realizing they may have watched the wrong person get handcuffed. The sergeant replayed part of the footage near the hood of the cruiser. I could only hear pieces from where I sat. Mrs. Harper's voice. Muffled. Upset. Then Derek saying something too low to make out clearly. The sergeant paused the video. "Back it up." The audio replayed. This time, one sentence came through clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Please stop touching my things." A silence spread across the courtyard, so fast it felt physical. Derek immediately pointed toward the phone. "You can't even prove that's about me." But nobody answered him. Officer Ramirez looked toward the building entrance. "Where is Mrs. Harper right now?" "She's resting," Derek said quickly. "She gets confused easily." The sergeant's eyes narrowed slightly. Confused enough to falsely accuse people. Derek hesitated. And that hesitation changed everything. Because until that moment, he'd answered every question instantly. The sergeant turned toward Ramirez. "Get medical response over here. I want somebody checking on her." Derek stepped forward immediately. "That's not necessary." The sergeant looked at him carefully now. "Why were you inside her apartment for 23 minutes?" For a second, Derek just stared at him. Then he laughed. Not naturally. It sounded forced and thin, like he was buying himself time. "I already told you," he said. "I was helping her with bills." The sergeant didn't blink. "You said earlier you were there for 10 minutes. Derek opened his mouth. Then stopped. And everybody noticed. The neighbors standing around us weren't whispering anymore. They were listening carefully now, watching every reaction Derek gave. Officer Ramirez replayed another section of the footage. This time the volume was louder. The hallway camera showed Derek partially inside Mrs. Harper's doorway, blocking most of the apartment from view. But the audio carried clearly down the hall. Mrs. Harper sounded distressed. "I don't understand these papers," she said weakly. Then Derek's voice came through. You already agreed to this. I want my bank folder back. You're confused again. Derek immediately pointed at the phone. She has memory problems. Everybody here knows that. But the sergeant was already watching Derek instead of the screen, studying him, measuring every interruption. And suddenly, I remembered something Mrs. Harper had told me weeks earlier while we checked our mail together downstairs. Quietly, almost embarrassed. Derek says people in this building can't be trusted, she'd whispered. He helps me handle important things now. At the time, I thought he was just another controlling neighbor who liked inserting himself into everyone's business. Now I realized something worse. He'd isolated her. The ambulance arrived first. 2 medical responders entered the building with Officer Ramirez, while the sergeant stayed outside with Derek. The entire courtyard felt frozen, waiting for what would happen next. Derek kept trying to talk, kept over-explaining. She forgets things constantly. She gets emotional. She asked me for help. Every sentence sounded more desperate than the last. Then Officer Ramirez reappeared at the building entrance. His expression was completely different now. Hard. Focused. Behind him, one of the paramedics carefully guided Mrs. Harper into the hallway. She looked shaken. And the second she saw Derek, she stopped walking. No, she said softly. The courtyard went dead silent. Derek stepped forward immediately. Mrs. Harper, it's okay. She flinched. Actually flinched away from him. That was the moment the neighbors fully turned. I saw it happen in real time across their faces. Confusion becoming realization. The sergeant looked toward Ramirez. What'd you find? Ramirez held up a stack of papers and a second metal lockbox. Then he said the sentence that drained every bit of color from Derek's face. You need to see these bank transfers. Derek tried, talking over him immediately. That's not what this looks like. But nobody was listening anymore. Officer Ramirez carried the documents to the hood of the cruiser while the sergeant opened the lockbox beside him. Even from the back seat, I could see folders stuffed with bank statements, unsigned checks, and paperwork covered in sticky notes written in Derek's handwriting. Mrs. Harper stood near the ambulance wrapped in a blanket, trembling. The sergeant walked over carefully. Mrs. Harper, did you give Mr. Collins permission to manage your accounts? She looked at Derek first before answering. That alone said everything. Then she shook her head. No, she whispered. Derek stepped forward instantly. She's confused. She forgets things all the time. Mrs. Harper's voice cracked. You said if I didn't sign the papers, you'd make them send me away. Several neighbors gasped quietly behind us. And suddenly, the entire story came together. Derek hadn't just lied about me. He'd used me. The second I called for a welfare check that morning, he realized somebody had seen too much. So before officers even arrived, he flipped the narrative first. He convinced Mrs. Harper to tell police nothing happened, then accused me of filing a false report to destroy my credibility before anyone looked deeper. And it almost worked. Officer Ramirez walked back to the squad car and unlocked my handcuffs. The metal clicked open around my wrists, and I realized my hands were shaking. We should have listened to you, he said quietly. That hit harder than I expected. Not because I wanted an apology. Because 20 minutes earlier, nobody believed me at all. I stepped out of the cruiser slowly while neighbors avoided eye contact. The same people who recorded me being arrested now stood there in complete silence. One by one, phones lowered. Meanwhile, Derek's situation kept getting worse. The bank records showed multiple transfers from Mrs. Harper's accounts into shell accounts connected to him over the past 6 months. Officers also found missing jewelry inside the lockbox taken from her apartment. And once police started questioning neighbors, more stories came out fast. Derek pressuring elderly tenants, intercepting packages, threatening fines through the HOA, monitoring people with cameras nobody approved. The sergeant finally turned toward him. "Derek Collins, you're being detained pending investigation for financial exploitation, coercion, and obstruction." Derek looked around, desperately, like somebody might defend him. Nobody did. Not a single person. As officers handcuffed him in the exact same courtyard where I'd been humiliated less than an hour earlier, Mrs. Harper quietly reached for my hand. "Thank you for calling," she said. I didn't even know what to say back. 3 days later, the charges against me were formally dropped. My arrest record was cleared completely. The HOA removed Derek from the board, and detectives uncovered even more fraudulent transactions tied to other residents. But honestly, the moment I'll never forget happened the next weekend. I was carrying groceries upstairs when Mrs. Chen stopped me near the mailboxes. She looked embarrassed. "We all thought Derek was protecting this building," she admitted softly. I glanced toward the courtyard, outside the lobby windows. The exact place where everyone watched me get arrested. Then I remembered Derek's face when the officers opened that video. And for the first time since all this started, I finally smiled. Because the same neighbors who watched me leave in handcuffs watched him leave the exact same way 3 days later.